Okay, will I start? Okay. In my flyer, I describe myself as a community champion. And I'd just like to tell you what I mean by that statement. My background, of course, is the community and the voluntary sector. And in many ways, that sparked my interest in politics. I've always believed that as a volunteer, as a member of a community group, a voluntary group, you can have a very, very significant impact on your local area, indeed on a regional or even national level. And as I said, it was that sparked my interest in politics. And one of the things I always determined to do was that if I got elected, that I would then try to promote and support the voluntary sector. And I've done that in many ways since my election. I suppose one of the most visible signs of that is that in 2011, I was awarded MEP of the Year for outstanding achievement in my work in supporting volunteers, in recognising volunteers, and in promoting volunteering across the EU. Another area where I strongly support the voluntary sector is in the current controversy about the leader companies. Some of you will be aware that the Minister, Phil Hogan, basically wants to take control of leader out of the community sector and put it under the governance of the county manager. Now, that is despite the fact that we here in the European Parliament have voted through the fact that community-led local development would be the core to the disbursement of leader funding. And indeed, I put down some amendments in the Parliament that were carried to strengthen that principle of community-led local development. But no, the Minister doesn't want this. He wants to bring them in under the governance of the county manager and the local authorities. And I, for one, am vehemently opposed to this policy. County managers, local authorities, they do a fine job. But I do not want the small percentage of funding, 5% of rural development funding, it's a small amount of money, that has been particularly earmarked for community groups so that they can take decisions about what is needed in their area, their locality, what is good for the community. I do not want that decision-making to move from local communities to local authorities. I believe each of them have their own distinct role, and that's the role they should play. But unfortunately, there are some politicians who believe that unless you have the fingerprints of politicians over every single decision that is made, somehow it is not valid. As I said earlier, I vehemently disagree with that. I believe that local communities too should have real influence and real decision making, and that is guaranteed by the current leader structure. And I've had a number of leader groups out to visit the Commission, and we have another meeting coming up. And I hope, though I cannot guarantee in any way, but I do hope that the European Commission will use its influence to try to ensure that leader, as we know it and as we have supported it in this Parliament, community-led local development will be the norm in Ireland. But of course, you know, I've supported many other community groups and community type groups. And one other group that I would like to mention are, of course, the credit unions. And today, as I speak to you, just literally 2 hours ago, I hosted a meeting here in the Parliament for the World Council of Credit Unions with representatives from as far away as Guatemala, Honduras, Canada, Ontario, Iowa, and of course Ireland and the UK and Poland and Estonia and many other countries throughout the world where credit unions are strong. And I have, over the last 10 years in my role here in the Parliament, kept an eye on European legislation, worked with the credit unions, both nationally and globally, to try to ensure that the legislation did not impact negatively on the credit unions. And indeed, today at the beginning of the meeting, the chairman of the World Council thanked me for my work in this area. And this I will continue to do. It's an ongoing challenge, but it's something that I I strongly believe in, because the not-for-profit ethic of the credit union movement is something that I strongly believe in. The voluntary aspect of it strengthens the not-for-profit ethic, and I believe they have a very significant role to play in Ireland and should be allowed to continue to play that role. There are many challenges ahead on that road, but I, for one, will be strongly supporting the credit union movement. And I suppose aside from that, when I talk about being a community champion, the other thing I can say is that I make every effort to support communities in the work they do, to visit, to hear what is happening, and to see where I can offer practical support and help. That is very much part of my work, and I believe a very important part of my work.